I'm joined today by Brainjar and Sean from Composable Finance, which I think this is the second time on my channel that I have a Polkadot project as an interview guest. I also had Dan Reeser from Akala here. Actually, before I discovered Cosmos, I was pretty big on Polkadot, so it's pretty cool to see that there are some connections and compatibility between those two ecosystems, between the substrate and the IBC economy. And we might even have some special announcement here on today's show. So I'll try to get as much as possible out of my two guests today. But first things first, thanks guys for jumping on. How is everything going on your guys' end?
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, I think during shaky days like this, the most important thing, I kept sharing this also with my community all the time, is just, learn, absorb, and study as much as possible about crypto, about different ecosystems, to be best positioned for when things are sunnier again, right? And crypto is always like this, things go up, things go down. But what really matters is the underlying technology, what builders are doing. And you guys are also incredibly active builders in the crypto space since a while now. But yeah, I think before we get into the compatibility between Substrate and IBC and the special announcement that you guys have, share a little bit on your guys' background, how you met, when you discovered crypto maybe, or the Polkadot ecosystem, since you guys are a parachain of Polkadot, why you focus on that ecosystem, and maybe just share a little bit of context on Composable and your guys' crypto journey.
Yeah, sure. I can start. I got into crypto like 2015, 2016 when I was just really interested in what was going on with Ethereum, and really this concept of programmable money really appealed to me. Started writing Reddit posts and stuff like that about concepts of like mirroring things from TradFi into DeFi, but obviously DeFi wasn't really a thing back then. Then I sort of saw there was lots of conversations around scaling and interoperability, which is right around the time I discovered basically both Polkadot and Cosmos at the same time, and realized that in the future, for something to actually power the next generation of the global economy, you needed something that was able to sustain different ecosystems kind of all under this same umbrella, and have that umbrella also be able to talk to other ecosystems that inevitably may not necessarily have adopted this interoperability thesis, but sort of remain important within the ecosystem. And so that's kind of right around when I started really getting interested in like rollups and Ethereum scaling solutions, but then was always mystified that there wasn't much talk about, well, how are we going to actually allow these distinct versions of rollups to actually talk to each other? And I sort of quickly realized that similar to like in TradFi, when there was a bunch of different stock markets popping up, efficient market hypothesis only really became a thing when there were organizations designed to essentially bridge these markets, like between NYSE and NASDAQ and stuff like that. And the people who then came after that, such as Robinhood, etc., they were the ones who were actually able to capture proper retail adoption by tapping into all of these distinct markets. And this is where I believe that building kind of natively cross-chain applications is what will be probably the future of crypto, and the future of how not only we interact with applications, but also maybe people who don't even know anything about crypto, who just want to get into it and not deal with the complexity that inevitably comes with crypto. And so that sort of pretty much spawned the birth of Composable. I've always been a Cosmos bull, Cosmos maxi, but I think I've always been a IBC maxi first and foremost, primarily just because it's I saw how many years it took to build IBC, and then once it was live, now it's obviously doing billions of transactions per day, and it's like this first elegant example of something that actually works as a transport layer from ecosystem to ecosystem. So I'm just really excited to be using a parachain as a sustainable kind of foundational layer for a cross-chain ecosystem, but utilizing a lot of the primitives such as Cosmosm, such as IBC from Cosmos, and tapping into those technical stacks, and of course the ecosystem as a whole, to achieve this concept of how can we most scalably build cross-chain applications. So yeah, I'll stop there with my rant, but I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that answers it pretty much pretty well. And I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on, because you just said you discovered Polkadot and Cosmos basically at the same time, why you then chose to rather focus your time on building on Substrate. Because here in my channel, and I think that's very valuable for my audience, because here in my channel I usually share my personal views, but I don't have technological insights. I'm not a developer. I can't read code, so I'm not too deeply familiar with all the benefits and pros and cons. And maybe back then Substrate was much more better to launch a chain or a product. But now with IBC, maybe something changed. So maybe you can share a little bit your thoughts on why initially you wanted to build on Polkadot instead of Cosmos.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, yeah, I have personally, like, on a personal note, have like been in a holder of Atom since the day it launched, essentially. So like I've been an Ultra Bull, but essentially when it came down to it, like the tech stack that is associated with Substrate and the ability to perform seamless runtime upgrades, and the ability to quickly deploy something onto a chain and not have to do sort of like an onerous like hard fork essentially, and have to sort of maintain a validator set, and a lot of this kind of other operational overhead. It seemed a little bit daunting for me as a founder to sort of have to kind of go from zero to like standing up that entire infrastructure from day one. Whereas with Polkadot, it felt like based on the relay chain and kind of based on the community that was already there, kind of willing to collate parachains, it felt like a lot simpler and like easier from an operational perspective. But I would say, like, from a like interoperability perspective, I fundamentally believe that Cosmos has the primitives necessary, hence why we're intending to become the first IBC enabled parachain. And I wouldn't be surprised if parachains talk to each other in like 6 months using IBC over Xcvm. But I do think that, as a team looking to like spin up a chain, a new blockchain, a parachain is quite an attractive model. And Sean can definitely go into this in more depth.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very interesting topic, because also interchain security, which is the parachain equivalent of the Cosmos world, is just around the corner and would enable something very similar, maybe even more elastic in the Cosmos world than what parachains in Polkadot currently offer. And just for context, what you just described is that basically Cosmos and Polkadot, I think they have the very similar mission or vision, how they view the crypto space. They just started on the different end of the spectrum, right? So Cosmos prioritized shipping IBC, which is this interoperability standard, and then Polkadot, they shipped first shared security, which now Polkadot tries to focus on shipping their version of IBC, and Cosmos focuses on shipping their version of shared security, which is really funny. Like they just switch roles right now. But yeah, maybe Sean, you can go more in depth on this shared security model, why you guys chose to go hard on becoming a parachain, and how that process actually went. For you as a project founder, as a team, how you experienced that whole project. Maybe there are some things that you really liked about it. Maybe there are some things that you would want to see improved. So yeah, please talk us through this process and your views on shared security, both on Polkadot and, if you can, also on Cosmos.
All right, sure. So to quickly think about the whole idea of shared security, you have to sort of think about the idea of, or the concept of proof of stake, right? Of course, proof of stake is now the favorable algorithm for consensus in the crypto ecosystem, but there's a problem with proof of stake in that at the early stages of a proof of stake network, it's very, very vulnerable. We think of like a low market cap proof of stake network where the security of the chain actually depends on who's holding these tokens. It becomes very easy to acquire 51% of a proof of stake network, the tokens of a proof of stake network, and then of course perform a 51% attack. And of course, the founders of Polkadot, Gavin Wood et al., they realized this problem, right? And they said, okay, what if we could have one singular proof of stake protocol that provides security to sort of parasite chains, aka parachains? So these parachains, they have their own state transition function. They have their own logic in essence, but then they don't vote on forks. Rather, another chain, a parent chain, is what votes on forks. And so from my perspective, that sort of allows, easy bootstrapping of a validator set, of a secure validator set, by the way, for blockchain products. And of course, you don't actually, once you're a parachain, you don't actually have to be a parachain forever, right? We've seen Akala on their roadmap saying that they will eventually detach from the Polkadot relay chain. Of course, once they've bootstrapped their validator set, and of course their token has a high enough market cap to warrant, this sort of detachment. And I'd say that's exactly why proof of stake, this whole shared security model, works perfectly for Polkadot. I'm not really sure how this interchain security would work on Cosmos. I haven't looked too much into the details, but I think if you can have a super validator set that allows other smaller chains to be bootstrapped, then it does provide value add, I would say, for these builders. And in our case, when we're deploying to Kusama and then subsequently Polkadot, we didn't actually have to do too much. We just had to register our chain on the Polkadot relay chain and start our own internal validator set. And then, of course, we're producing blocks, but then the relay chain is actually what is finalizing these blocks and providing our fork choice rule.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the way it works in both Kusama as the canary network to Polkadot is through this bidding process, right? So there's an auction, and basically projects have to, I don't know what's the best way to phrase it, but basically the community of these projects has to lock up KSM or DOT in both cases for, I think it's the duration of the lease, right? Which is, I think, 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
Tokens are locked up. And then after the end of this duration of the parachain slot, which you said is not forever, it's just for a certain duration. And I think even once para threads ship, I think I read something about that, you could even sublease that space or part of your space that you have to other chains. I don't know if that's still, if that's already functioning or still in the works. But I think that's how it works in Polkadot. And in Cosmos, how it's supposed to work is basically more through on-chain governance, so that the Atom validator set would also validate blocks on the new chain, which is called a consumer chain. It's kind of like the equivalent to a parachain. And then Atom stakers would earn this new token of that consumer chain, which is being provided as an incentive to pitch basically to the Atom validators and Atom community to say, hey, we want to become a consumer chain. This is our economic model for you guys. Is that enough? And then through on-chain governance, they would verify or validate if they want to onboard this new consumer chain. But I think it's still probably 3, 4, 5 months down the road for interchain security to come on Cosmos. Polkadot and Kusama both already have it since half a year almost, I think, fully in production. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the core difference. Yeah, on the technical
Yeah, I mean,
detail.
Yeah, no, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned something previously in your last question, like what was it like, right, to deal with the bidding and stuff like that? To be honest, it definitely felt really stressful initially, like you seeing hundreds of millions of dollars getting locked up and knowing that you're going to have to go through the same exact process pretty soon. But I think what we've seen is like there's been a mass decline, right, in the amount of capital required to actually secure these slots. Um, I think this initial frenzy of like these things are going to be super expensive, et cetera, like this is definitely dissipated for sure. Like, um, I think that if you have a novel idea, um, and you're able to garner some eyes in the community, um, even as a black sheep, you'd be able to, secure a slot. I mean, in many ways, we definitely were newcomers to the Polkadot space. I mean, we only started like a year ago, really, and we were able to secure like one of the first um, 10 slots on Polkadot, which like the other people that we that's in that group have been at this for a couple years now. So I think it's like still definitely meritocratic in many ways.
Yeah, and I think some Cosmos people, at least that I've talked to, they also see that as a potential downside that Polkadot started with this initial artificial scarcity, but now you see actually it's more getting more and more democratic, easier for parachains to be onboarded, and I think also through para threads in the future there might be a more scalable onboarding for those chains to lease security. But yeah, that's interesting. And how do you view? I mean, you guys are a core part of the Polkadot ecosystem. How do you view this ecosystem as of today, in terms of DEXs, in terms of liquidity, in terms of DeFi? Because as of my understanding, Composable also aims to become a cross-chain DeFi hub within like based on Substrate, but also connecting to other ecosystems, right? So maybe you can walk us through a little bit about the current stage of the Polkadot ecosystem and how you guys want to position Composable within that ecosystem to become a predominant DeFi hub.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think generally speaking, Polkadot is very early with DeFi. There hasn't been a ton of stuff yet, and a lot of teams within the Polkadot ecosystem have basically just added EVM to their chain, and that's kind of how they're spinning up initial DeFi. So I think in many ways, like Polkadot has not seen its season yet. It's definitely behind. Like there's no like osmosis. Obviously, there's like some lending. There's I believe a lending market that has popped up, but still like very nominal TVL. So we're definitely in the very early days. So for us, like our core focus really has been kind of two key things. One, Xcvm, this cross-chain virtual machine to essentially allow developers who write CosmWasm smart contracts to be able to deploy cross-chain applications. Now, what does that actually mean? Underneath that, we have a series of trustless bridges, such as Centauri, our bridge to Cosmos. And we have planned bridges with other ecosystems as well, that support light client-based bridging. Essentially, this Xcvm lives on top of these trustless bridges and orchestrates communication from essentially dApp to dApp. So you'd be able to write something as general as, take my USDC, swap it for X, and then liquidity provide using, X and some other asset that's also sitting in my wallet. That's really the vision of Xcvm. And so what we've done in the meantime, as we're building towards that vision, we've also built sort of examples of substrate-based DeFi that would actually live as pallets on our parachain. So they would actually live as modules on this actual hub. And this includes our DEX, Pablo, and then we have several other projects under incubation through Composable Labs that provide leverage and several other sort of DeFi primitives, options, etc. So we're definitely hoping that the sort of Cambrian explosion happens first with substrate-based DeFi. So being able to interact with applications using assets such as DOT and KSM, but then sort of being able to have these trustless bridges to allow people from other ecosystems to interact with the DeFi that we've built on this hub, and then sort of eventually from there having developers be able to write kind of blockchain agnostic applications that sort of execute DeFi no matter what ecosystem, specified more on what they'd like to accomplish versus how.
Would it be fair to say that Xcvm, which is this interoperability standard, is that kind of like the equivalent of IBC to the substrate world, or?
Actually, it's not. It's not, and the reason is because IBC, Cosmos, and parachains have a very, very different architecture. In the relay chain architecture, you have parachains, you have parasite chains, but then in Cosmos, you actually have standalone chains that provide their own security. And so, from the relay chain perspective, because it's a completely different architecture, and both chains have a mutual trusting point. Messages are actually routed through the relay chain, whereas in IBC, messages are routed through relayers, as you know. But at a deeper level as well, because these parachains are actually supposed to be application blockchains. Xcvm is actually sort of like chain level messaging, so you can send messages from a chain to another chain, because the executor for these messages are actually there's actually a module on the parachain, right? So whereas IBC is more generic and allows you to do DApp to DApp level messaging. So if you have a contract on one chain, you can interact with a contract on another chain through IBC. It's very seamless. It's designed for this purpose. Whereas with XCMP, you start to run into issues.
So is XCMP more for the like internal substrate world, or would it also be possible, for example, for the Cosmos Hub to implement XCMP and be compatible with everything that's happening within substrate? Or
unfortunately, it's not compatible. XCMP is very much Apple-like boxed into the substrate ecosystem. It's like I said, it's a very different architecture. There's a different trust assumption as well in play here.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. And then I guess that's why you guys went ahead and said, hey, we're going to be the first substrate chain to implement IBC, because it unlocks more use cases,
exactly.
potentially also more liquidity. It gives us also our like substrate users more access to a different ecosystem. So walk us through that process on why you guys think implementing IBC is a good idea in the first place, and also where you guys currently stand with that idea. I think you released an article 2 weeks ago about the XCMP, Xcvm. I'm getting confused with all these names, but the virtual machine that's basically interoperable. So yeah, maybe you can share some more insights on that.
Right. So like I said, if we wanted to talk to blockchains that are external to the Polkadot ecosystem, we're going to need a completely different messaging protocol / format. XCMP is not going to be it. And to our knowledge, IBC is still ahead of the pack when it comes to inter-blockchain messaging protocols. Period. It's like we said, it's already in production, it's already securing billions of dollars of transfers every day. And the beautiful thing is, it's entirely modular. Like, it was designed to be blockchain agnostic from day one, which means really any chain that can submit finality proofs about its state can use IBC, which of course, in a sense, precludes some chains. In our research, Solana does not have finality proofs, which means we cannot bridge trustlessly to Solana. EVM-based blockchains that you still use some sort of proof of work system also can't bridge trustlessly to them. But then if you have a validator set, this is the proof of stake network, then we can build trustlessly. We can build trustless bridges to these ecosystems. And so by using IBC to build trustless bridges, So, for instance, Near, which is one of the projects that we're going to announce a bridge for eventually, we're able to communicate. Applications are able to communicate with applications on these other chains trustlessly, with the same trust guarantees as if they're just using the Near blockchain directly. And that's kind of one of the biggest reasons for us, picking IBC and going with the standard, and not just adopting it, but also contributing to the IBC framework itself. We have a few specs that are going to be merged soon with the main IBC repo. We got a grant recently for the work we've been doing on IBC. So yeah, we're really big IBC maximalists.
Yeah, and you already teased earlier a little bit that you guys are building a DEX. I guess that's one of the dApp or probably main dApps that you guys want to connect with the IBC economy. So talk a little bit through about the DEX. Also, what Kepler users or like Cosmos users and IBC users can expect, what we will be able to do in the next few months once this DEX is up and running. Are we going to see IBC tokens being listed there, and can we provide liquidity there? Can we connect our Kepler? And also, what's the timeline for that? Maybe we can walk us through on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so currently the bridge to between Polkadot and IBC enabled chains, this is currently, like, we're working on it, and we're hopefully going to start doing testnet to testnet things kind of early June. So really hoping like sometime this summer that this bridge actually goes live, which of course would be massive, because then DOT can flow to osmosis trustlessly. Atom can flow into Polkadot DeFi trustlessly. There's no need to rely on trusted solutions like Wormhole at all. At that point, it becomes completely like you could really move UST to Polkadot completely trustlessly. So that's obviously like a super big step. And so realizing this, we decided to architect a DEX that was prepared for these types of kind of cross-chain assets flowing in and out, and being able to be modular enough such that an asset from the Cosmos ecosystem that has been bridged over can in fact be liquidity provided against DOT or any other asset within the substrate based economy. And so this DEX is called the Pablo DEX, and as a nod towards how much we're interested in the Cosmos ecosystem and how aligned we truly are with the vision of IBC, we've decided we're conducting an airdrop of the Pablo token itself. A portion of this airdrop will be given to Osmo stakers. So people who are staking the Osmo token, they'll be able to sign with their Kepler wallets and claim Pablo tokens on Substrate, and immediately start having the tokens on our Picasso Kusama parachain to start doing DeFi things there. And then of course, when Centauri is live, being able to bridge that Osmo over, or that Atom, or any other asset on an IBC enabled chain, and be able to trade, liquidity provide, and eventually of course interact with our other DeFi that will be there at that point as well.
There we go.
So, yeah.
That's the alpha you only get here on Cryptocito on my YouTube channel. Airdrop for Osmo stakers coming up. People love airdrops. To be honest, we're getting really spoiled in the Cosmos ecosystem with airdrops left and right. I'm sure since you are also early in Atom, you must have gotten a lot of airdrops. So yeah, this is really cool. And it's a cool onboarding for the DEX. I think that's what people always forget, is this is not free money to make users rich. This is just an onboarding strategy, a user acquisition strategy. I think that makes a lot of sense to target Osmo stakers and bring them over to your DEX. I think that's very smart. And then, so it's a little bit confusing. You also just threw in Centauri, and then the Pablo token, and then you have Composable, and you also have Picasso and the Pika token.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the architecture, just for us to understand what chains exist, where they exist, and what tokens exist, and what kind of like the role is of the tokens as well.
Yeah. So we'll start from the bottom up all the way up to this virtual machine that you referenced earlier. So essentially, our Kusama chain is called Picasso. That's the Pika token. Our Polkadot parachain is called the composable parachain, and the token there is called Layer, Layr. The Pablo DEX will exist first on Kusama, but eventually exist both on Kusama and on Polkadot, but with the same token. Centauri, as I mentioned, is the bridge between the substrate-based ecosystem and any IBC-enabled chain. So that's our bridge between both of our parachains to the IBC-enabled ecosystem. Now, when you have the DeFi and you have the bridges, then the logical next step is, okay, how can I write applications that natively can talk to each other? So that, for instance, if I wanted to write a DEX aggregator that could utilize the liquidity on Osmosis, on Pablo, on Uniswap, on Aurora, or any other chain that we're connected to, this would be written through our Xcvm, our cross-chain virtual machine. And this is another Cosmos primitive that we have adopted. We're utilizing CosmWasm as the framework for developers to write these contracts. Of course, with like all these generalizable kind of components that we've added that reference, different applications across different ecosystems, etc. But I think it's definitely provides a brand new use case to CosmWasm, because now you can essentially deploy your CosmWasm contract directly on our parachain and now have created an application that interacts with Cosmos, that interacts with Dot, that interacts with Near, and all these other ecosystems that we trustlessly connect to. Cross-chain smart contract is a weird concept to think about, but it truly is the way that users will be able to abstract complexity. Developers will be able to abstract complexity for users into the future.
That's awesome, yeah. And maybe before we wrap things up, talk and I still have some questions from the community that I'm going to ask you. Talk through some of the timelines regarding the launch of the DEX, if you can. I don't know if you're able to, but I know the community is going to roast me if I don't ask you that. In terms of snapshots for the airdrop, how people can get involved, and what kind of like time frame we're looking at for all these things to go live.
Yeah, so I think my team will kill me if I specifically give details, but I think the intention is to really shift the Picasso ecosystem, as in the Pika token, the Pablo DEX, these primitives that will kick off our ecosystem within the summer. So like, yesterday I was on another podcast, I said ideally, hopefully before Polkadot Decoded, which is at the end of June. But of course, don't quote me on that. And more information will come from our official socials where we say like, here's the snapshot date, here's the timeline for everything. So we will definitely be announcing more and more things in the coming weeks. I'll also be attending Gateway to Cosmos this next week in Prague, where probably more alpha will be dropped. But yeah,
so we're gonna meet there. I'm going there as well. What just the snapshot, was it already taken? Is that something you can say, or is it still in the future?
Yeah, we could say the snapshot has not been taken yet.
All right, that's good enough, Alpha. That's very good. Yeah, that's cool. So watch out for announcements. I guess also I'm gonna link all the channels for Twitter, Telegram under this video, so people can join also and stay up to date on the hottest and latest. Another personal question that I had, as you talked about the whole architecture, your Polkadot chain, your Kusama chain, how do you view that as a parachain on both chains between these two communities? Is it like, do you like simultaneously work on both chains, on the Picasso chain as well as the composable chain, or do you just focus more on one, or how is that process working for you as a team, and also for you to see traction that you're gaining on either of those chains? Is it the same? Do you get only on one chain, or how does it work? I always wondered on those things, because it's such
Yeah,
a
I mean,
special
it's
architecture, right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's two very distinct communities, right? Like Kusama, you get like the degens, you get people really interested in aping into like high APYs and stuff like that, right? Whereas like with Polkadot, I haven't really felt like what the community actually is. It feels like, you know, more institutional players, more like Ethereum mainnet type players. And so like Kusama has a very special place in my heart because I really like the community a lot. And the community really is like reminds me a lot of the Cosmos community, reminds me a lot of, you know, other kind of like grassroots, just like learned a bunch of stuff on Discord and now have become experts randomly. And so for us, like we definitely take a Kusama centric approach. And because of that, I think it makes us much more technically ready to do things on Polkadot where like the institutions and others, you know, larger players will play.
That's very interesting. I'm really surprised to hear that. I thought actually it's like the same community on both chains, but hearing that, you know, the retailers and apes are more into the Kusama space, and retailers and institutions more on Polkadot. That's interesting. I didn't know that. But yeah, cool to hear. Yeah, I think as we're wrapping up, maybe you can share some of the final comments, also in terms of what's next. You already teased a little bit about the Pablo launch in the next coming weeks and months, and also how people can best get involved, especially cosmonauts, how they can get involved early on in your guys' ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think definitely like we're really trying to get more and more integrated into the Cosmos community. Obviously, like immediately the first thing people think when they see like our website and our materials is that we're a .sama heavy project. But the reality is like, you know, we're adopting Cosmosm, we're IBC maxis, like very much prioritizing like integrating with the Cosmos community, like really trying to get people because essentially we're working on the same visions. We're both trying to achieve complete ecosystem agnosticism and complexity abstraction for the next generation of applications. And I think in many ways we're pushing forth the vision that Cosmos has always had, which is essentially a universe of blockchains. And so, yeah, I think the best way to get involved is to join our Discord, join the conversation. And I think like this will be a really great our community if, you know, more and more cosmonauts come and join in. Will be a really great example of kind of unification of two historically like at odds ecosystems.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I'm very much aligned on that. I think, yeah, before we close this video, let's do some of the questions. I made a tweet that had very high engagement, actually. 120 likes, more than 10,000 impressions, and I just made it today, actually, this morning, a few hours ago. So that's crazy. Both communities are super active. That's a great sign, and I think it's cool to see those communities now being merged through you guys. So you're doing a lot of adding a lot of value to that. But so here's a very interesting question that I also asked myself, and I had this conversation also with Jack Zempel, and you said earlier he is also substantial part in making all this possible on a tech level. So Ocean Ed is asking, what will happen to the Polkadot relay chain if parachains can successfully communicate via IBC, potentially even leasing their security from the Cosmos Hub through interchain security once it's live? So does that not, I guess the bigger question is, how does this affect the overall architecture of Polkadot?
I'm not really sure, like I said, how interchain security would work on paper. But parachains are, unfortunately, there's a word for this actually. they're co-joined, with the relay chain. It's impossible to separate them in such a way that they get their security elsewhere. But we are definitely seeing a future where parachains actually just communicate with themselves using IBC. And the reason for this is, in order to open a channel to talk to another parachain using XCMP, you have to do this whole relay chain. Because, like I said, the messages are routed through the relay chain. So you have to do this relay chain governance proposal, and people have to vote. And I'm seeing that process as a very cumbersome process for teams who just want to prototype stuff. And it's more likely they will be partial to a permissionless IBC method.
All right, because I guess that's a question a lot of cosmonauts have, is whether, I mean, of course there's always some like sort of competitive factor to it, between both ecosystems, and that's all fair. I think that's all good. Would be interesting to see how that will play out in the longer term, and whether you guys think that this will affect the whole architecture and whole design intention of Polkadot with parachains and this limited space that they have with their model. But yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out in real time, because you guys are the first ones to do it, right? So that's a big new step for both ecosystems. Helen Gon is asking if you have any sort of demo already, or anything that you can already show how that's gonna look like. I know this project for a long time, but I still can't figure out what they're aiming for. So is there any demo or anything that we can play around with already?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so our DEX will be in like testnet very shortly, and then at Polkadot Decoded, end of June, we will be revealing Xcvm. So there will be a demo for Xcvm. Users will be able to mess around with this example application we've built, plus also actually deploy the contracts on our parachain. So that'll be really exciting to see. And then I think additionally to that, we're definitely going to be having lots of testnet to testnet stuff. So if you're listening and you're a IBC enabled chain and want to engage in this testnet to testnet stuff for our bridge, like feel free to reach out. Would love to add you to this like group of projects we're working with on that.
Nice. And Polkadot Decoded, you said it's in late June, right? That's the main Polkadot conference, or?
That's right.
Okay, cool. So first Gateway, then Polkadot Decoded, and then hopefully in late September, Cosmoverse. I hope you guys are in for that as well.
In Colombia, right? Yeah.
Sure, yes, sir. Another question, actually, a lot of people have asked about this, crowd loan rewards. I think first explain what crowd loan rewards, what that means, and then if or when they will be distributed.
Yeah, so this is our Picasso token. So we gave people tokens to lock up their KSM. And so we, like, along this timeline I mentioned about like launching the Pika token and launching the DEX, etc. That's when we would release these Pika rewards to our crowd loan stakers, essentially.
All right. And then Market Cap is asking two questions. First question, are we going to see .ibc first or a KSM IBC? And then the second question is whether there is going to be an AUSD's UST pool anytime soon.
Yeah, so number one would first be KSM IBC. And then number two, AUSD exists on KSM. So yeah, we could very well possibly in the near future have a UST, even a 3 pool or a 4 pool, UST, AUSD pool on Pablo. And of course, if you want to take it a step further, we could also bridge USDC and other stables for a 3 pool or a 4 pool.
Nice. Manimod is asking, what is the benefit of using Xcvm, which is what you guys are building, in comparison to using Xcm from Parity?
Yeah, so again, it's two different things, right? Xcvm is like actually writing the cross-chain smart contract, the cross-chain application itself. Whereas Xcvm is just the communication layer between two parachains.
Yeah. Awesome. Let me see if I find anything else. Yeah, I think maybe that's more of a general Polkadot question, but I think we can wrap it up with that one. Chris is asking, how does Polkadot plan to be more open in terms of their parachains? Because I think as of now, this space for parachains is limited, right? I think it's 100 something, 144, something like that. So do you know, like on a broader level, how these parachains in the future will be more open and more accessible for smaller projects?
Yeah, I mean,
sounds
yeah, go
biblical.
ahead.
Nah, I just wanted to make fun of the 144.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, right, like these things, there's supposed to be hundreds of parachains, right? Not just 10, not just 20, not just 30. So I think there's like going to end up being a flatlining or a decrease in like the amount of assets required to actually secure a parachain slot. Not to mention, I think it really does become the responsibility of projects like us, you know, to make sure that these new projects get the recognition that they deserve, right? It's just about building a strong community. Like we want to see the ecosystem succeed, and that obviously means we need to push forward the projects that make sense, and support them and try to get eyes on them. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. All right, it's very interesting for sure, and I really appreciate you guys also sharing more context around both architectures in Cosmos and Polkadot. I think it's very valuable for cosmonauts to understand better the two ecosystems. Obviously, on Twitter, you always have a lot of tribalism, even within Cosmos, but also with other ecosystems. I think that's very human, and we're never going to get rid of this. But hope this video helps for cosmonauts to understand that yeah, it's time to merge Polkadot and to bring over substrate technology and liquidity and users into Cosmos and vice versa through IBC. So really excited to everything that you guys are building. Hope to see you in 2 weeks in Prague, and also then later in Medellin, Colombia for Cosmos. We really appreciate your guys' time.